Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer and listener, Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe here, your host of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. Let me welcome you and thank you for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to find out what we're about and what we're talking about. We're going to talk about the Young Africa Network, and my guest is none other than Mr. Taku David, and you'll find out in a moment why I'm so excited about this particular guest. But let me ask what I always do, ask you, is to strike or hit that subscribe button so that we can continue to grow the nuggets and get to as many people as we can. That's what we're about. We want to empower, enthuse, energize, and inspire, like we keep saying. Welcome to the studio, Mr. Taku David.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited and honored to be on the program.
Okay. Yeah. Be kind enough just to tell us about your background and your education.
All right. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. Just an enthusiastic, ambitious, and passionate, young African. I've got a background in economics, which is what I studied. Fortunately, economics is a field which gives you a very well-rounded understanding of the world. It's not just based on finance, but you get an understanding of what's happening in society, social issues, governance issues, finance issues. So it's a really well-rounded field. But I found myself finding my passion in marketing and strategy, which is really where I've found my voice and been able to express myself and be creative in finding solutions for young Africans.
Okay. So your degree was in what?
In economics.
Okay.
Yes, I studied that in Pretoria.
Okay.
Yes.
And can I call you an economist then?
You can call me a strategist.
Strategist. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course you ended up in the media space. Tell us about the transition from
I was
economics to media.
I was fortunate enough in university to have joined an organization called the NACTUS. And this is something that I recommend anyone who's in the university space or is in high school moving into university to join. And this program works with young student leaders to empower underprivileged communities. So at that time, I would say at the age of 24, when my friends were running out to the bars and the clubs, we were working until 4 a.m. developing business plans that were based on people, planet, and profit, and building sustainable solutions to impact communities in South Africa. So through that, we were given, opportunities to experiment and try around, play around with business. And they say, no perfection is made until you get to play around with it at least. And in that, I was able to find what I was passionate about, which was the marketing field. And it was actually not my idea, but someone who actually identified that skill in me and said, Taku, I think you'll be a good marketer. And we want to make you the marketing manager for this organization. So the thought was planted in my head. I gave it a go, and it worked out, and I haven't looked back since.
Tell me a little bit more about the organization, and does it have a presence in Botswana?
Enactus should have a presence in Botswana.
Enactus.
Yes, Enactus. It should have a presence in Botswana. I know it is in Zimbabwe. It's in South Africa. It's an international organization, and they hold international competitions once every year in a destination. So I think in my year it was hosted in South Africa. They've done one in Mexico. They've done one in the US. And really is something that I urge anyone to participate in. It will open up your mind and it will give you practical experience of what it is like to run a business, to work in an organization, to work with teams. Very similar, actually. Very similar to that. I think in other countries it also goes under Boost, Boost Fellowship. Okay. Where I was in Pretoria, it ran as the Tax Top Junior and Senior Leadership Program. And you also get to develop, lots of hours for community service. So if you're looking to get into, an NGO space or humanitarian space, it's also something good to bolster your CV as you look to grow in that area.
Talk about the Young Africa Network, which I believe is an organization you're involved with. Tell us about its genesis and the name and what it does.
The Young Africa Network, that's my life, that's my passion. What we are is we are a strategy organization which works with young Africans to develop solutions for their businesses, African-based solutions, African ideas made by Africans for Africans. And generally our thinking is that you can't copy-paste ideas. Ideas have to be unique to where they're being implemented. We need to be able to look at our inherent condition as a continent and build solutions based around that. We look at products like M-Pesa. We look at products like EcoCash. We look at services like the Boda Boda. Those are uniquely African things. We need to be developing and building upon what's existing in our societies and create our own technologies, create our own systems that benefit us as Africans.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so this was founded in 2018. We initially started as an event platform whereby we would host various events with young leaders. And it was a networking platform, really, where people could come, share ideas, ask questions, and be with like-minded people. This has then grown into, what we realized is that, like church, we don't want you to come for a service and be motivated, and on Tuesday you're back to living the way you were living.
Yeah.
So we decided to increase it just from being an event platform, but also building systems within. So we have online training platforms as well. We've got mentorship sessions called the Young Africa Sessions, which we host every month, which is a small group of like-minded people that get to share and work together as accountability partners.
Okay.
And then we also have our voice, which is the Young Money radio show, whereby we actually profile young people that are doing well. And not just young people, also people with young ideas like yourself, Mr. Mogobe, who can come and share their insights, young at heart. Because we are the future, and we need to be able to discuss and shape the continent we want to live in.
Okay. Just before we go deeper on this organization, let me find out a bit more about you. Zimbabwe, South Africa, where you went to study, and Botswana. Help me connect the dots.
Looking for opportunities. Always looking for opportunities. So I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and due to the sort of we were the breadbasket of Africa at some point. And academically, we still hold very high standards. However, most Zimbabweans do look for tertiary education out of the country. And I was fortunate enough to attend the University of Pretoria, which gave me, a lot of experience meeting people from different backgrounds, different countries, lots of people from Botswana there in South Africa. So that's where I applied my trade. And upon finishing my degree, I moved back to Zimbabwe, where I started working in radio. From radio, I then traversed into logistics and also expanded into setting up the Young Africa Network. So if you find me in Botswana, I'm looking for opportunities and looking to bridge the gap between different African countries. Opportunities are not only where you are, but you have to go out there and look for them.
Wow.
And one thing I've realized from my travels is that we're more similar than we are different. So I always find it exciting to come out and see the similarities between us and share also the difference that we have in my country and contrast that with what's happening in your country and see where we can help each other.
Let's start with one area of focus for you, which is radio. What's the name of the radio? How did it come about, and what does it do?
So ZFM Stereo is Zimbabwe's most urban radio station. I think when they came into Zimbabwe, they came with a big bang because it was something fresh. It was a sound that hadn't been heard. It was a sound that was very aspirational, and I think that's the name that the word we like to use to encapsulate what ZFM is. It's an aspirational brand. So it doesn't matter whether you're in your BMW X5 or you're taking the taxi to work. It's aspirational. It's what you want to be. It's what you can imagine yourself to be. And that's what we like to portray.
It's in English?
It's in English. And fortunately, it's a vibrant brand that allows creativity to come across. So there's not many radio stations that you can walk in and say, I have this idea and I want to bring this to life.
Can you catch it here in Botswana?
And we'll support that. You can actually catch it in Botswana. You can download the TuneIn app on your Play Store, and you can stream anything live on there.
And you particularly are offering what specific program?
So my program is the Young Money Show. So we I don't know if it's only in Zimbabwe or if this is an African problem. We have a term which we deem the Mbinga. Mbinga in my country.
Yeah.
And Mbinga is effectively a rich man. And unfortunately, I think the society has degraded into sort of the,
It's like
the worship.
Mr. Big, Binga.
Yes, Mbinga,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
big guy with
Yeah.
the big stomach and the and the gold ring.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the culture has descended into almost like a godlike worship of these Mbingas, and a lot of it is not really based upon.
Are they not called blessers in certain areas?
They can be blessers as well. Most Mbingas are blessers, but I think that's in a separate constituency.
Yeah, okay.
So, I think it's descended into a point where, there's become a godlike cult and following of these Mbingas, and it's not really based on any particular value other than the financial perception that you have of this person. So a lot of people don't actually know, the bank account or the business, what this person has actually done to gain that status. But they've become, the role models for young Zimbabweans. So we wanted to change that narrative and actually speak to young people that have a consistent track record of building businesses, a consistent track record of leadership, a consistent track record of entrepreneurship, so that we can actually highlight a story that can be emulated. Some of these guys, we know these tenderpreneurs, or some of these, these corrupt individuals who, one day wake up with $1 million. Those are not people who we believe that young people should be looking up to. Those are not role models. So we want to highlight situations where someone can listen and say, I want to be like that person, and this is the route they took, and I can follow that route.
Are there any big names that you landed on your show who had an impact?
I think one of my favorites, it's fascinating because every time someone leaves my studio, I sit there for about 10 minutes and think, wow, what is going on here, and what else can I do to improve?
Yeah.
But just to highlight, some of the exciting names, there's one gentleman called Victor Mopunga. If you're to look him up, he's really one of our youngest millionaires in the country, and he runs a technology called Flex ID. He's recently spoken at the Davos event in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And effectively what he's building a KYC technology based on blockchain.
Wow.
So it's very exciting to speak to people like Victor. He's an MIT, Harvard, Yale graduate. And when you have those types of minds, it gets you running, racing, and thinking, what can I be? What can I do? We are also joined by a gentleman called Samuel De Mairo. Samuel De Mairo, at the age of 17 years old, was able to digitalize the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange.
Wow.
The stock exchange was before you had to fill your buy order, go and submit that, at the ZSE. Now you can actually download an app on your phone and start trading in the stock exchange. So this has opened up the stock exchange to so many people just by a 17-year-old gentleman. Now he's gained in years, and he's running a very successful business, Chingetedzai
That's very
Microfinance
interesting.
Depository.
I came across an article about a Zim guy who's created a sort of a car that drives on
We're trying to get him.
Yeah,
We are trying to get him.
It was so mind-boggling, and they said they don't want to deal with him, or they don't want to register his patents because his patents defy the laws of physics.
Yes, so that's Maxwell Chikumbutso, and he's a gentleman that I've really, really been following for some years, and very eager to get him on the program. I think he's based out in Mexico now with Sayeth Technologies. He's been able to find some investment on that, and he was able to build a vehicle that works based on vibration.
Yeah.
Yes, so for a lot of people, this is a very confusing technology, and unfortunately, there have been lots of threats on his life as well.
Yeah.
Recently, the last time I spoke to him, he had just come out of hospital. I think he had been poisoned or something of the sort.
Yeah.
And of course, the energy lobbyists and people in that space are not very happy to see someone who can make fuel a redundant solution. But again, guys, let's protect our geniuses. African
He's
ideas,
an absolute
African
genius.
Solutions, absolute genius. And those are the people that should be our celebrities, not just some guy who drives an X5. What are the solutions?
I think the race is on. You and me have to get him on. If he doesn't come here, he must come to both.
We can do it together.
Yeah. All right. Now let's talk about media marketing and corporate strategy, because that's one thing that you talk about. First, tell us how you developed an interest there, and secondly, tell us what you're doing specifically.
All right, so it's a very long story, a very fascinating story. So I told you, the beginning of how I got into the marketing space,
Yes.
where someone said, Taku, I think you've got a skill for this. And when I came back from university, I started working at ZFM Stereo. Before I had my program, I came in there as a marketing associate. So when I joined, we were coordinating all types of campaigns, massive events, boxing events, outdoor functions, award shows, seminars. That was our space. And in that light, I was tasked with creating various proposals for companies to enhance their brand, to give them value offering through the radio network. So that was where I got my start, really familiarizing with media and how that correlates with marketing. Fast forward a couple of years, I was always told I've got a voice for radio. So I was working in the company. Thank you. I was always told, in the organization that, Taku, you've got a voice for radio. You should give it a go. So this was about 4 years before the radio show actually started, and I submitted a proposal. Got turned down. I submitted another proposal. Got turned down. Again, I think I went about 3-4 times. And eventually, 4 years later, they actually said, okay, cool, come across. Here's a radio program that you can host. So it took a lot of time to actually get the show rolling. But in that time, I would go out and do, I was a little bit sneaky because I would go and do live reads for my clients, and I would do it myself. Typically, you would have to bring a radio personality onto site, and they would have to do the live read or the news or the crossover, but I would just take the microphone and do it myself. So I was trying to, sneakily get my voice on it. And eventually, I think they got familiar with the idea that, okay, this is a radio voice. So that's how I entered the media space. So what I then did was, because of my position where I was privy to many meetings where we were creating marketing campaigns for companies, organizations, government organizations, for politicians, I got a real good glimpse of what it means to create value through media and through marketing. But then moving on to strategy, what I then realized that to market, you have to market something. So I can't just go out and market a product or a service or a system that doesn't work or doesn't function or doesn't offer what the customer wants. So what does a marketer do? A marketer is like a doctor. He asks you, what's your problem? What would you like me to fix? What would you like to gain? Would you like to gain muscle? Is your ankle hurting? I then diagnose that and find a solution for that. So that's when we look into strategy, because it's not only about going out and making noise about a brand. It's about the entire service. The brand is a promise of what you are offering.
The brand is a promise of what you offer.
Yes.
And how does that tie with strategy?
So now when you look at the strategy side, all right, we say, fine, this is what your promise is. This is what you want to promise the customer. But how do you do that? We then look at, fine, within your organization, what is the attitude of your team? What are your systems? What tweaks do you need to the product? Perhaps you're making a 500 milliliter bottle when it needs to be a 300 milliliter bottle. We look at other aspects of the business. So to call it marketing strategy is very vague because I think it's all encompassing at the end of the day.
Okay. So all of this is self-taught?
Self-taught, I would say, taught by gurus like yourself who host conversations like this.
Yeah.
There's so much information that you can glean off of the internet and you can glean off of other people. A wise man once told me, he said, Taku, I'm not young enough to think I know everything. Only a young man thinks he knows everything. So there's always room to grow. There's always room to apply yourself.
Mostly out of stupidity and arrogance.
Exactly. So, even I've recently taken up traveling around Africa. Different African countries. I know a lot of us want to go to UK, Australia, US, but travel around Africa. It'll open your mind. It'll blow your mind. What's going on in our own continent and where the opportunities are and what solutions that you can actually copy paste from other countries. Funnily enough, speaking about branding, I was in Uganda, and in Uganda they've got the boda boda. The boda boda is their form of transport. That's the little the motorbike, and
they also have
you
those
get on
in
the
Rwanda.
back. Yes, in Rwanda. Lots of them in East Africa.
Yeah.
You get on the back and you hug this guy and you ride around. But what these guys have gone to do is they've built a little umbrella that goes over the top, and all these big companies are now branding on that umbrella. So these are just small ideas that you get from going out, looking at things objectively and seeing where's the gap, where's the opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, in your travels, you've become familiar with the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, trade agreement. What is your familiarity with that? And let me ask that first.
Unfortunately, and I think this is something that a lot of us are guilty of, is that either some of us have no knowledge or very basic knowledge of what that is. However, I strongly believe that this is a step in the right direction for Africans. I had a guest who came on my program, and I always refer to my program because I've got so much, there's so much of a wealth of wisdom that comes through. Comes through.
Yeah.
And he says, Taku, the day you decide to get rich is when you start thinking of Africa as one country. When you go to the US and you look at New York and California, those are little countries on their own, but they treat themselves as one country, as one unit. You go to Europe, the EU, one block, one unit. What about us? We really need to come together and trade within ourselves. It gives us more leverage on the bargaining table when we're working with other countries. We are able to maximize on economies of scale. We're able to see who's got competitive advantage in certain industries. So it's really a step in the right direction. And as the Young African Network, what I'm really campaigning for now and what I'm really advocating is that for us Africans, us young guys who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and I'm not trying to look for instant gratification. Let's look for delayed gratification. The leaders of tomorrow, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now, we need to start collaborating and making these connections and relationships now.
I agree. And I've had a look at the agreement, and I've seen that it has various protocols attached to it at the back. And there's a protocol on services, there's a protocol on I think on foods and other things. So I would strongly urge that people familiarize themselves with the protocols. I don't know whether Zimbabwe has ratified. I know that Botswana, when I last checked, had not ratified. So it was a source of frustration for me that although we've signed the agreement, a lot of African countries, I think,
still are yet to ratify. I think
they
Zimbabwe
haven't ratified them.
Nigeria had not at that point, and
I don't know which countries, but I know Botswana, when I last checked, hadn't. So I'm just wondering, because you can't do much if your country doesn't ratify.
Yes.
You cannot take direct advantage. Yes, of course you can trade, but a lot of the barriers to trade that exist, you'll be unable to work through them unless the agreement is part of your local law. I mean, that's a fundamental principle of international law. So I don't know what your experience has been in terms of implementation and taking direct advantage of the act.
I think the challenge that we're facing on implementation is the sort of the reservations that some of the smaller players in the game are having with regards to what will happen when trade is liberalized. I'm a net importer. Does that mean that my industries are never going to grow, my local industries? Take Zimbabwe, for example. We are a net importer, and our direct neighbor is South Africa. Our other neighbor is Botswana. What does that mean? That means that Nestle is going to be the only one making coffee. If a local player is to come in, he's not going to have the economies of scale. He's not going to maybe have the same technological superiority. So your local players will never actually grow. So I think we do need to find some form of balance as to what industries are we opening up and what industries are we protecting and why. Going back to economics, basic economics tells you about trade is based on what area do you have your competitive advantage.
So imagining for one moment that the agreement is open, we can get those visas without a problem, and some of the barriers are taken down, especially the tariffs, unreasonable tariffs that are blocking trade. What would you then do, assuming that scenario?
What would I do with regards to
your businesses?
All right. No, what we would do with regards to business is, one, identify what does the basic man need. What is consistent across Africa? There's certain industries that are consistent throughout the continent. Things that are like construction. There's so much room for construction in Africa. There's so much room for signage. It's interesting because Botswana, it's very, very clear. Not much signage out here. You go to West Africa, there's signage everywhere. There are so many industries, and we're looking at scale. We need to identify industries with scale, something that you can replicate across Africa. So that is initially what I would identify and get myself into initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there scope for radio across the continent? And if so, how?
There's so much scope for radio across the continent. One of the things that really bothers me is that they say until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what's happening with us. We're not telling our stories enough. It's really great now that there's people like this Wodemaya who's traveling across Africa and giving a different perspective. Over 2 million now, right? Over 2 million. It's because what he's creating is a different idea.
Just traveling and going everywhere.
Yeah.
I like his stories. Getting stuck in Togo border. Doing
I saw that one.
An interview. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
And the number of millionaires and billionaires is unearthing. We didn't know we had so much success.
And that's really, the challenge that we've had in Africa is that someone else is sharing our narrative. There's so much going on here. There's so much brilliance. There's so much excellence that we have here. But someone else is telling the story. Even when you go out to these first world countries, it's also not all, roses and sunshine there.
No.
Except the camera's pointing somewhere else. It's all about perspective. And so I think in Africa, we need to aggressively... I'm a big fan in... this word is always used wrongly. Propaganda.
Yeah.
This word is always used and it's always got a negative connotation. But there's positive propaganda.
It's associated with lies.
Yes. But there's positive propaganda. Reinforcing the best about us. And, maybe at some point we'll also see ourselves differently. Because it's really about who you see yourself as. Some people like to say we were kings. Yes, we were kings. We are kings.
We're kings. We will remain kings.
We need to hold ourselves in that regard. So media, radio has a powerful voice, has a very, very powerful voice. What we do now also need to invest is the infrastructure for this communication to reach everywhere.
Yeah.
Terrestrial platforms have been great in disseminating information. But now, terrestrial platforms were sort of exclusive. They excluded many voices from coming to the fray. And now we have podcasts like this one, and we have programs that are hosted online. The only challenge is that still limits the audience because you need to have a smartphone, you need to have access to data to be on those platforms. So I think we need to work on enhancing our infrastructure in that regard, to allow more people to be included in the media space, and also allow more people to have reach to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you specifically in terms of what your company is doing, either yourself directly or as Young Africa Network. What are you doing in Botswana? What's your interest here? And any developments you can update us with?
At the moment in Botswana, we're just touching the ground and, feeling the environment. We want to see who we can work with, who we can partner with. We're hoping to host an event here in Botswana in 2023, and host a young seminar here. And this is something just to get the ball rolling and get the conversations happening between Zimbabwe, between Botswana. How can we trade and how can we interact? So it's really a feeler. And so far it's been very exciting meeting the faces here. Very lovely people, very nice people. And I think there's great opportunity. You guys should never take it for granted. You've got a lovely country.
Tell us about the event. What is planned?
So what our event platform is we invite 2 to 3 young people from completely different backgrounds and discuss a particular topic. So we're still identifying. I think with this event, what I would like to do is perhaps have 3 guys from Botswana and 1 from Zimbabwe, and just have a different voice and discuss, what are the opportunities here in Botswana? How do young people play a role? And how do we also get people like yourselves, some of the more experienced players in industry, to hand on the baton and nurture and grow young people to reach the heights that you have? Yes. So, come through, bring a business card, exchange ideas, and don't leave without at least getting 4 or 5 numbers. Yeah.
And making use of them.
The power of networks. I think this is, people talk about it all the time, but I don't think people understand the skill of a lot of people of strategic networking. I think even for me to be on this program, it was by virtue of networks, right? So people don't understand how far a network can reach you, interacting with the right people, being one phone call away from anyone. That can help you grow immensely. So this is really what, the type of environment we want to create. A safe space for people who are crazy about business. People can call me a little bit mad sometimes because I'm excited about these things. I live for this. And we want to have an environment where there's people like that as well, where you can feel that it's okay for me to spend the whole night talking about what I read in The Economist.
Yeah. And how do the viewers take advantage of that? Is it premature to discuss how to get hold of you or your people to be part of it?
All right. No, you can definitely reach out to me on Instagram, Taku David Esquire, or the Young Africa Network.
Okay.
You can email me at ophir21@gmail. That's OPHIRXXI@gmail.com.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful, but I think I'll put that in the caption.
At the end, yeah. Also.
But yeah, you can definitely reach out if you've got any ideas on how we can collaborate and what value we can add. Ultimately, it's about adding value.
Yeah.
I'm always pulling these quotes because I spend so much time in these seminars.
Yeah.
I attended a seminar at Pick and Pay headquarters in South Africa.
Wow.
And Mr. Ackerman at the time, I think he was the CEO
himself,
at the time.
The founder.
He's famously quoted for saying, if you go into business chasing money, you're not going to make money. You go into business to create value, and money follows value. So really what we are trying to do is build value, create value, and all the opportunities come around that.
Will come.
So,
will come chasing after you.
that's really what we want to do. So if you've got any ideas, if you want to collaborate and see how we can make this a big thing, come on board. We're young, we're excited, we're robust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You spoke of handing the baton. I think that takes us to the next point, which is legacy for African youths. You're talking about succession planning, handing the baton. Can you speak to that subject and what is your views on it?
There's no need to reinvent the wheel, There's standing on the shoulders of giants to see what's above you. I think a lot of people are obsessed with this whole idea of started from the bottom, self-made. If that's your condition and that's your situation, then by all means do that. But there's a lot of people who have parents, have mentors, have bosses that they can glean in from. And if you have access to that, why not take advantage of that? Why not learn from that? You don't have to start from zero. You can build on what they've left for you. So I think it's very, very important for, firstly, the young person themselves to take it upon themselves and say, fine, I am the son of Mr. Mogobe, right? My father has gone this far. This is what I can learn from him and build and grow up into the next generation. And I think this is what the Europeans have gotten very well, is that they've been able to build on the legacy that was left by previous generations. We are getting there, of course. Some of us are still, first generation, second generation. But we need to really, as the young people, take the ownership and say, okay, I need to learn from this. The second thing is...
Be proactive about it.
Be proactive about it. The second thing as well is the parents. What I've noticed from my background, and I'll be quite honest, I did grow up in a somewhat privileged background. What I've noticed is that when you grow in a privileged background and you've got a successful parent, on the African side, they tend to shield you. They tend to protect you a little bit from the tough stuff. So I remember
they don't expose you to
they don't
toughness.
expose you to toughness. So I remember I used to work at a service station, at my parents' service station, and they would make me pour petrol in the cars, and and it was in a quite rough area. So the guys are always trying to cheat me for cash and all of this stuff. But I would do that for 2 hours, and then I would go and hang out with my mates. That was the deal, And then whereas you see the Indians, they can have their kid working in the shop doing the worst job for the whole day. They throw him right in the deep end. So I think also, from the parents' point of view, we need to take
So you think by exposing you only for 2 years, you're somewhat shielded?
I think what happened there is that the gloves were kept on. There were certain jobs that they felt maybe were too difficult or maybe even below me that they wouldn't allow me to do. So I think although it's not going to be very popular with the kids, but you gotta get them to clean the toilets.
Give them
to
some
sweep.
tough love.
Yeah, give them some tough love, because I was fortunate to work for a very brilliant man who can tell you everything from his company financials to how much toilet paper is used in his company. The best leaders know everything about their business. So you need to start getting your hands dirty from the beginning as well. And let's not be treated like princesses, because the world is tough. Yeah.
All right. Now let's talk about your home country, Zimbabwe. What business opportunities are you unearthing there? Because I get the sense that there is two realities in Zimbabwe. There's the reality that is portrayed in the media, and there's a reality on the ground where things are really moving up and the country is picking up. Correct me if I'm wrong and tell me what opportunities are there.
Yeah, like you're saying, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? But ultimately, the glass can always be refilled. That's the way you should look at it, right? So in Zimbabwe, I think we've gotten a tough rap internationally with regards to what people think the prospects are in the country. We've come out of a very, very tough time, and I think there's a resurgence of the Zimbabwean economy. It is true that it is a tale of two cities. I think the income gap is something that we can really work on. It's a land of the rich and the poor. But however, it's really about how you look at it. From a person who's outside, from an investor's point of view, there's so much opportunity in that country. What Zimbabwe allows you to do, which I find to be one of the greatest things, is that Zimbabwe allows you to be an owner.
To be an
owner. It allows a black African to be an owner and a decision maker, which is something that I think you cannot take away from anyone. I think Robert Mugabe did a great job in allowing black Zimbabweans to own land, to own mines, to own businesses, and creating the mindset that I can own land, I can own a mine, I can be an employer, I can own businesses. So the mindset shift was really brilliant in our country. So you find a lot of young people have just decided, where before it was go to the city and get a job in the office. People have realized, wait a second, there's wealth in the farms. Go to the farms, create food, go mining, go and mine. So there's really great opportunities for young people whereby there's access to land. If you really want to go and farm, in our country, you can go to your village, you can go and speak to your village chief and say, I need a plot of land to farm, and you can get a plot of land. So there's so many opportunities for young people in that space. Fast forward from that, maybe not everyone is a farmer, maybe not everyone is a miner. We've got a very, very robust industry with big companies like Econet, which is from the same group as Mascom. We've got big companies like Liquid Telecoms, that's actually here in Botswana. You've got the Cresta Group. You've got a wide range of companies which need services. Digital marketing has taken a great interest recently. People are large in that space. There's so many industries that need service to be supported, and business is continuing as usual.
How true is the rumor that there's even a reverse exodus? People are coming back.
People are coming back because they realize that out there,
is it
there's
true? On a big scale?
People are coming back and people are leaving. If I'm to be very honest with you, people are coming back and people are leaving. And again, I think it's a mindset thing. Do you want to be an owner? Do you want to have a stake or a say in your country, or do you want to be sort of to live within a system? I always say that I'm not going to name the name of the country so as not to sound bad. But there's a certain country where you can go and you can get your iPhone, you can get your BMW 3 Series, you can get your nice apartment, but everything is on credit. You're working every month to just pay those bills. Or you can live in Zimbabwe where you have your meager car that you bought cash. You've got your stand or your plot, it's yours, cash. Do you want to be an owner, or do you want to continuously live in a system, a rat race that you're perpetually chasing? So a lot of the people who are coming back have realized that maybe this life is not for me. Constantly chasing bills, constantly chasing systems. They call it standard of life and quality of living, right?
So
I think in Zimbabwe you get a quality of
ownership.
Living. It promotes ownership. It promotes ownership, and that's just the mindset of the people now as well. That I would rather own this and let this be mine than live my life for rent. Yeah.
What about the agricultural sector?
So the agricultural sector has really come back. After the land reform, of course, what happened is that we took a big knock, and I think we can accept that, and we can accept where we failed. That perhaps in that initiative we weren't yet prepared for what came. But fortunately, I think now looking back, we're about 23 years into it, and those farmers who got in on those farms have now developed the skills and acumen to be productive. So again, a country is not built overnight. It does take time to develop the skills and the competence within your people. And like I said earlier, you need to be able to play with something for you to become proficient at it. You need to be able to experiment and try around with something for you to be good at it. You're not just going to wake up and be an A-grade farmer. So Africans were not just going to wake up and be A-grade farmers. It took time for us to develop, the skills, the discipline, the acumen. And I think we're now at a point where the country is getting back on track with regards to agriculture. There have also been some very good government programs like Command Agriculture, which have really assisted with regards to farming implements.
I'll ask for myself about property and construction. What are the opportunities there, if any?
Opportunities are there. We've got a new capital city.
Really?
So yes, officially we have a new capital city in Mount Hampden.
Huh?
In Mount Hampden.
Oh.
Yes, it's not very far out of Harare. It's just about 30 k's out of Harare. We have a new parliament building there, and this is now the administrative capital of Zimbabwe.
What is your objective?
You tell me.
Is it the same as Lagos in Nigeria, and then moving to Abuja, and then creating a whole system around Abuja?
I believe that's what
deliberate government action.
I think it's a deliberate government action. So we've recently just commissioned the new parliament building there in Mount Hampden, and this was a project that was long coming. But officially, if you're in construction, there's space to grow there.
So they're looking for apartments. They're looking for offices.
The ground is open. The ground is completely open for new development, because over the next 20 to 30 years, of course, there's going to be more people looking to locate there, to live there, to be closer to government facilities, to be closer to government services. So, there's big opportunities there. As well, the city is expanding. The city is expanding. Maybe someone can argue with me, but what I'm seeing is an increasing middle class in Zimbabwe. And the city has grown. Before we used to have a very small city with certain neighborhoods. You had your north and your south, but you see expansion now into areas like Madokero, your High Glens, and every area needs its own little complex. Everything was centralized before. If you needed anything, you had to come to town. That's how we were. But we're starting to decentralize the city, and you're starting to notice it as you drive through Harare.
Mini shopping malls.
That's actually, that is the current trend at the moment. I think if you come to Harare now, you'll drive and not be able to go more than 2 k's without bumping into a new shopping mall being developed. So the developers are really, they're at work. They're really at work in Zim right now. And you've got lots of foreign companies involved in that space as well. South African businesses involved in that space. We're on the up.
So money is being made.
Money is being made.
Yeah. Is it an advantage or disadvantage that you are using the US dollar as your main currency?
Going back to the currency issue, I think this is really the biggest challenge that we have as a country is the currency issue. The US dollar, of course, is a preferred form of trade for most businesses. Most people prefer to receive US dollar because on US dollar you can plan your life. Right. I'll give you a perfect example. In February of 2022, the rate was $1 is to 115 RTGS, Zimbabwean dollars. By now, the rate is at about $1 to 950.
It's crazy.
So for planning purposes, for pricing purposes, the menu costs are ridiculous in Zimbabwe, because every month you are doing new rates, you are doing new prices, and it's really hard to keep up with.
Inflation?
It's not runaway inflation at the moment. I wouldn't call it runaway inflation, because we've experienced runaway inflation before. This is not as bad as it was, and I think with the introduction of the gold coin, they've been able to. You could buy a loaf
with $1 billion.
Exactly. We're not back at that point. But I think with the introduction of the gold coin, it has somewhat stabilized the running away of the rate, because we had reached a point where the rate was about to run away, and with the introduction of the gold coin, it really reduced the demand for people to be holding currency in US dollars. It was easier for you to take your RTGS and buy gold coin. It was cheaper for you to take your RTGS and buy gold coin.
Comfortable then trading in US dollar?
We're very comfortable trading in US dollar. It's the preferred form of trading. In Zimbabwe, we've got multiple forms of currency. So you've got your RTGS, which is your digital local currency. You've got your bond, which is the actual local cash currency. You've got your US dollar cash. You have your US dollar Nostra, which is a US dollar banking currency. So we've got about 4 different forms.
All of them are accepted as normal legal tender.
All of them are accepted as normal legal tender.
You can use in the street and everywhere.
You can use in the street and everywhere, except, of course, on the banking side, with the Nostro, for example, Nostro transfers attract a 20%. 20% of that is taken and converted into the local currency at the bank rate.
Okay.
Or if it's an international payment, 40% of that is taken and converted to the local currency at bank rate.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of challenge there with regards to incentivizing people to trade in the Nostro accounts because of that. So usually people actually prefer to deal in cash, hard cash. Yeah.
I get back to your area, which is really communication, marketing. You spoke about the importance of creating our own narratives. If you had the power and you could hit a magic wand, what are the main challenges, the main changes you'd implement to really help us create our own narratives as Africans?
More voices out there, more powerful voices that are speaking positively about our continent. I think the news that we continue hearing about Africa is negative, and we need to have more voices and more diplomats out there for us. That's number one. Number two, in shifting the African narrative, unity. I think for too long, Africa it's always been divide and conquer, and I think that has always been a strategy, I guess, used against Africans, that the people will revolt against themselves. And we're tired of hearing about coups and all this type of, we need African unity and African stability. In Africa, I'm a firm believer in stability. That's what will take us far. We need a stable environment for us to be able to put in the infrastructure, to put in the systems that will help us grow. So I think this is the story that we need to be shaping. And again, continue just being good people. Don't let your detractors turn you into them. Let's continue being the people that we are. Ubuntu, good people who are welcoming, loving. This thing of xenophobia and being against our brothers and our sisters. We're the same people. We're really the same people. When there were no borders, people were crossing these borders left, right, and center. So I think that's really what we need to be selling the story to ourselves. Not even selling it out there. We need to be convincing ourselves of these stories.
That we can do it. We are capable.
We are capable, because up until we do that, we're always going to be fighting ourselves.
Does that mean we may need to invest more in media and in media-related infrastructure?
I think we need to invest in media, number one. Number two, I love this development that we've had with the Africa Fact Book. Because
tell me about that.
The Africa Fact Book is pretty much, this was done by the African Union. And this is a collection of all African history, effectively. And simply saying that you guys are saying that Africa has no history. No, this is our African history. And this is what we as the African Union are saying. This is our African history. So we also need to invest in more of that. I'm able to send you a soft copy, and I think they should have it on the African Union website. We'll have a look into that. But
they have a history of each African country from an African perspective.
It's about a 900 page book. I'm not sure if they've got it broken down into each African country, but it is based on oral history and also written history. Is what they've based it on, which I think is very, very important to start off, is that understanding who are we, who were we, and really recording that. It's very important to celebrate those successes that we've had.
I'd like to get hold of it.
I'll definitely send you a soft copy. I've got that.
And once those narratives are there, we need to now aggressively publish them.
Exactly.
And spend money on marketing. I do not know the extent to which, for instance, the African Union is promoting the African Fact Book. Do you think they're doing that aggressively enough?
What I think the African Union needs to do with that book, and I hope someone from there is listening. If you want some consultancy services, I put my email in there. What they need to do with that book is that they need to make it a little bit more digestible. The way media is consumed, the way content is consumed in 2023 is completely different. Back in the day when there was nothing else to do, and you could only sit next to your radio under a tree, you had a lot of time to read 400 pages. It was easy to get the masses to consume that content. But now I think they just need to make the book a little bit more digestible, summarized and digestible for the ordinary person to be able to glance at it and appreciate it. Of course, they can keep the long form version, but just for marketing purposes, break it down into more digestible bits that more people are able to get around and enjoy.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about future in terms of your brand as Taku David.
Yeah.
What can we foresee? Of course, we don't want to delink it from the Young Africa Network. Those two brands. What do we see in 10 years, 15 years? What does the future hold for us?
In 10 years, 15 years, this year I made a decision that I'm moving out of my comfort zone this year. There were many things that I was maybe hesitant or afraid to do, and I just said, you know what? You lose nothing. You have to become what you want to be. You have to become your thought, and you have to become what you see. So I think in 10, 15 years, you're going to see the Young Africa University. And what we really want to do is look at coaching certain aspects of life. I'm a strong believer that, academics
a brick and mortar university or a virtual university?
2023, brick and mortar and virtual, because we want to get to everyone.
Yeah.
But I'm a strong believer in the fact that it's more of our emotional intelligence that helps us advance in life. Academics is one thing, but in the University of Life, you need to understand things like your own temper. You need to understand your own fear. You need to understand love. You need to understand revenge. You need to understand all of these small emotional triggers that really make us who we are when we wake up in the morning. That's the difference between you doing a proposal and not doing a proposal. That's the difference between you making a phone call for a meeting and not making a phone call for a meeting. So really understanding some of those small aspects and how those aspects relate to success or forms of leadership or forms of execution. So I think that's really where you'll see me in the next 10 years. You'll perhaps see me in leadership positions, either in Africa or in my country. And just continuing to share my experience. I don't believe that I'm a guru of anything. I'm simply someone who's sharing his experience and trying to help other people as I bumble along. So you'll continue hearing my voice on
at the beginning
platforms.
of that answer, you touched on something interesting where you said you want to just effectively be fearless and move on. What caused the change? What, for instance, you couldn't do before that you've now decided to do?
Like I was saying, you have to become your thought. I think sometimes that saying that Mandela saying of our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, but that we're powerful beyond measure. I don't think people understand how real that is and what that fear feels like and what it looks like. I'll give you an example. When you think of a big idea or a big opportunity and your heart races, that's fear. That's fear of your greatness.
Yeah.
When you sit down and you need to do a proposal to get funding for a $20 million project, and you sit there and it looks like a mountain, and you say, this is too much, I'm probably not going to get that money. That's fear of your greatness.
Fear of your greatness.
We convince ourselves out of big opportunities because we feel that they're too big for me at least. So I think there's a lot of things that we just need to be bold, courageous about, and run towards the fear, because 90% of the time it's only in your mind. It's only in your mind.
I thought you would give a practical example of what you did in terms of running towards your fear.
In my case, I think speaking my mind. I think some of our ideas are sometimes maybe too dangerous or too outlandish or too grand. Too grand. So I think this year I'm a little bit more focused on speaking my mind and expressing myself a bit. Of course, in the environment that I live in, you also have to be a bit smart and tiptoe
That's
accordingly.
That's emotional intelligence part.
And tiptoe accordingly. But this year definitely going out and just sharing a bit more of what's on my heart and being unapologetic about what I believe in, what I stand for.
I always talk about grit in this program. Grit is very important ingredient for success. And in talking about it, I normally want to have an idea of a setback that you have encountered whether it was adversity turning into a blessing, and how you dealt with that setback or that challenge.
Great one there. I remember in 2018, yeah. At that time, I was working in radio, and at that time, I think I had, done a couple of very, high caliber events, really feeling like I was the man about the city. You know how us young guys, young guys can be.
Yeah.
And like many Zimbabweans, I also wanted to, go and see the bright lights and the greener pastures, and I took a job. I went to South Africa, and and when I arrived there, this guy says, "My friend, the job we hired you for, I've been fired." So the guy who hired me for the job, he got fired, and the division he was supposed to open in the company was completely disbanded. So he says, "My friend, there's no job." Of course, me being from Zimbabwe and not really having a permit at that time, there was nowhere to go and complain.
Yeah.
You're stuck there in South Africa, and you were promised this great grandiose job. Now there's nothing.
Yeah.
All right. So that being said, at that time I was too proud. I'd already done a farewell party in Zimbabwe. I had a farewell party. I'm moving. I'm leaving. All of this, and at that time I was too embarrassed to go back home. So I said, no, let me stay here. Let me try and create a lot. Let me try and see what I can do. I remember I had to work 2 jobs. One in the morning from 6 a.m. until 6 o'clock, walking door to door as a salesman for products that no one bought in the heat.
Yeah.
And then after that, I would quickly run, change into my waiter's outfit, and I would go and I would waiter at the restaurant that was just up the road from me. And I remember now we would finish at about 1 o'clock after polishing all the glasses. Polish all the glasses.
Yeah.
And now you must walk home with all your tips in the pocket in the middle of Pretoria. So, you're walking around the road and, checking if there's anyone here and there. And I did that, and it was painful. It was very painful because, one, people don't understand context. People will say, Taku, that's a small thing. Many people go through that, and I understand that. But, everyone experiences life differently, through their own position and through their own vision.
Yeah.
And at that time, coming from, a great job in radio, and I really felt that, my life was progressing. At that time, I felt like I went, completely 360.
Did you feel like you had reached rock bottom?
It really felt like rock bottom. And, being shy and not being able to express defeat back home and say, guys, it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work. And eventually, I actually just had to conclude that, it didn't work.
And you went back home?
And I went back home. But what I realized out of that whole
experience... It took you, 6 months, a year?
It took 6 months. And I said, you know what? This is not cutting it, I had something going on back home. Let me go and try it. But what I realized out of that whole experience was that take a chance. If it doesn't work, you won't die. You can still come back. And I'd like to believe that I did come back.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that was a big experience in just giving me confidence in the fact that, fine, it may not work out the way you see it, but you can continue fighting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is a time when you can ask me a question if you have one.
Mr. Mogobe, why do you have this program?
For exactly the same reason you have your radio show. It's a 2-pronged question. One is selfish reasons, and I've answered this question before, where I'm hungry for knowledge. I'm like a sponge. I want to absorb knowledge. I want to know what's happening in our area, and this program offers that opportunity for me to enrich myself personally. Secondly, what you said about promoting our own narratives. It's very, very important to share these stories. For instance, I didn't know the power of entrepreneurs in Botswana. I didn't know. I used to join in conversations where people were bad-mouthing our entrepreneurial spirit, bad-mouthing our system, and I used to nod when people talk about it. Now I say, no, wait a minute. I have had personal experience. There are people doing this great feats. People have achieved this. We have multi-billionaires. For instance, I was talking to a young man the other day who's early 20s, who's talking in terms of multi-millions in foreign currency. he's established an international business from his dorm, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to meet people like that. And I've got someone like you today who's just enthralling me. I mean, my brain is on fire. I mean, it's just going ka, 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 in terms of excitement, in terms of realizing what's happening out there, what the possibilities are. So that's really the reason I have this show. That's the reason why I want to continue having it for an indefinite length of time.
And if I can just add one more question, where do you see this Nuggets of Wisdom podcast growing into?
It's already taking me by surprise. I mean, I found myself in the list of the top 100 influential Botswana. I would never have been there without the Nuggets. And someone was notifying me that we're in the top 10 podcasts internationally in terms of Apple iTunes. So to be in the top already, it's going where I never dreamt it would go, and we're about to reach 10,000 subscribers. So it looks to me that anything I would say about where it's going would be a limitation. So I don't want to say anything. It's limitless where it's going.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to cross-pollination, between us in Zimbabwe, here in Botswana. And let's share on issues. Let's share on current affairs.
Absolutely.
And let's expand the horizons of the listeners.
Well, it started. It looks to me like you might end up being my tenant. On top of that, here you are. You are my guest. So I'm willing to reciprocate in one form or the other.
You can only connect the dots looking back. We'll only understand in a few months
we will.
where this takes us.
We will. All right. Now, can you leave the viewer watching you in that camera with one final inspirational message?
I think for me, what I will just reiterate, and I think I've said it 2 times or 3 times on this program, it has to manifest. You have to finally become your thought. I think so many of us don't understand that everything is created in the mind. For you to build a building, you have to first imagine what it looks like. The mind is so powerful, and your mind can lead you either to success or to failure. Become your thought. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir. You've been a great guest. But before we part, you have to tell them where they can access you, your contacts on social media and everywhere else.
So my phone number is, no, I'm just playing. You can catch me on @Taku David Esquire on Instagram, or at the Young Africa Network on Instagram. You can catch us on Facebook, the Young Africa Network as well. Yeah.
Okay. No WhatsApp contacts, nothing like that?
No. You can catch us on those platforms.
Okay. Wonderful stuff.
Only a pleasure. Thanks for the nuggets.
Cheers.